All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the June 6th meeting of the Stockbridge Assessors Board. Though it's not on the agenda, it's a necessary thing to do, and we need to reconstitute the board this morning.
I make a motion that Gary be chairman of the assessors.
Second the motion.
Any other nominations? Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
All right. Last week's minutes, I carried over everything that needed to be carried over on this list. So number 2, I figured out the abatements and Tammy put them in the system for the ATB settlement for the Camp Mackinac for fiscal year 21 and 22 for you guys to sign. And that will be the last abatement coming out of the overlay for fiscal year 21 and 22, because everything's been settled at this point. So there are no pending appellate tax board cases. And actually, I have not received, I'd have to look on the date. I think we might be past it by now. I have not seen anything come through for the appellate tax board for fiscal year 22. So there may not be any cases next year. I think July 1st might be the last day. I'll have to double check that. The exemption reimbursements from fiscal 22 were number 3 were entered on Gateway and approved. Those come back on the cherry sheets. Number 4, form of list for second homeowner study for fiscal 23. So we're still getting the forms back, and the due date is June 17th? June 17th. But obviously we'll still accept them after that date. I won't be actually doing the study until probably mid-July, but they are coming back at a steady pace, which we appreciate. Income and expense statements, that's a whole nother issue. Those were due on June 1st, and we have a lot that are not back. So I really don't have time to send another request for those, because we've already, on the last request that we sent out, we put that this was the second and final notice. So basically, you guys would have to decide later on whether you want to impose a fine on the ones that weren't returned. Even without a fine being imposed, those that have not returned it will lose their appeal right for fiscal 23 if they're not happy with the assessment. And that was made very clear. We did get back quite a few, but there were certain ones that I've tried to follow up on with emails and phone calls, and I won't mention who they are, that we have not received from the first try or the second try. So I just want you guys to be made aware that there are still a bunch of them that haven't come back. I'm still going to have to go forward and do the second approach to value during the certification with the ones that we got back. I will develop the rental schedule and the expense schedule using the ones that we got back. And again, we don't use that approach other than for 2 properties, but it's still important that these come back, especially in a certification year. And what we may want to start doing is sending them out yearly, just so people get used to sending these things back. Even though we don't use the income approach across the board, we could discuss this later on in the year. Maybe that's something we should start sending out every year. Because I think when these are sent out now it's 5 years, they get the forms like, I've never seen this form before. When typically, yes, they have seen it, but people forget. It's kind of like the form of list. That study's only done every 5 years as well. We don't send those out on a yearly basis. That would be crazy to do. We don't need to do that.
So will the state accept the returns that we got, or will the state?
Yeah, they'll ask me, because it goes on our work plan. When Joe is here in August, he'll ask me how many did we get back, and I'll just add up whatever we have at that point. How many were used in your analysis for coming up with a rental schedule, and then we'll just go from there. I mean, he won't he won't come back and say, well, you got to do it all over again. I have to fill in the blanks and do an income approach on every single commercial, industrial, and rental property, with or without these forms. These are just a way of getting an average of what are the rentals going for? What are the restaurants charging per square foot? What are the offices charging per square foot? I can fill in the parts that, haven't been returned just by going on the internet and looking up, what is the average that we're getting for that? And we can go with that. They don't put a lot of emphasis on it because Stockbridge doesn't have that much in those three categories, but they still uphold us to do what every other place does and develop a rental schedule. That rental schedule is also something that I know Chris Marsden had used it before as an indication of what to charge for, the rentals that we have for the town. So it's important to have it on hand, and this helps me establish that going forward. Again, I think we've gotten more back than we ever have. There's a few ones that I really need that I really kind of fill in everything. Number 6, we got the email back from Joe Barberi for the data quality results from the DOR for our fiscal 23 certification. I just got it last week, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I talked to him on the phone. He's like, there's no big changes. He was pretty satisfied with what I gave him for our initial data review. And the only thing I need to send him is just a little blurb that I looked at it, and I will do that this week. Personal property inspections began May 24th, and I've talked to RRC twice already. So far, so good. There have been a few businesses that have been a little bit upset because, the method in which we use to do the inspections, but this is how they do it everywhere. And all he's going to do, he's making a list of the ones that may not provide the data that we need, and then we can decide what to do with that later on. But so he's in his 3rd week now doing them. He's super nice, and I'm very curious to see what will come back from this. I'm going to need that information at least by mid-July, so I can start plugging it in. We did get the bill already for 60 accounts that he has already looked at. So that's going well. I would encourage that if there's anyone watching that owns a business and either gets a form of list that's dropped off or have their form of list reviewed, give us a call if you have any issues, and we will verify who he is, what he's doing. This is a process that we have to do every 5 years. Okay, number 8. The board is going to meet with, and Kevin, how do you say your last name?
Good morning, Kevin Chittenden.
Okay. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Kevin.
Morning.
Thank you for seeing us. And Tim Doherty, also a museum director, is here with me for moral.
Oh, hi,
Great.
Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Hello, everybody.
So Kevin and Tim are here today to discuss the filing of the Form 3BC and 1B3 for the tax exempt filing for Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum Incorporated. Do you guys want to just start and tell the board and our audience about your organization and the why you're filing for tax exempt status for fiscal 23?
Sure, be happy to. So the Berkshire Scenic Railway was established in 1984. We've been a nonprofit railroad museum since that time. From 1984 to roughly 1989, we offered train rides from Lee and Lenox down to Great Barrington through Stockbridge. So we've been coming to the town since that time. Then there was some issues with the track, et cetera. So there was a period that we had not run. From 2003 to 2011, we ran from Lenox to Stockbridge. Of course, at that time, the station was owned by the High Meadow Foundation, who graciously allowed us to use the facilities to stop the train there. Passengers could get it off and use the restrooms and whatnot. We did some special events down there, like fire truck shows and our Polar Express run, which was very big and whatnot. Since 2011, we again have some track issues, which we are not able to offer the train rides. As you probably are aware, MassDOT has purchased the railroad, is in the process of doing significant track upgrades there. And so while we don't have any date certain, we are very hopeful that we will be able to resume train rides from Lenox to Stockbridge. Since 2020, I want to say, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in 2020, High Meadow was in the process of deacquisitioning a lot of their assets and whatnot, and approached us about purchasing the station. So we purchased the station from High Meadow, and now we own it. And we realized that High Meadow had not or was not granted a tax exempt status for the station. So we began the process of working that through. All of our profits, if you will, our revenue goes back into the organization. We own the Lenox Railroad Station. We own many pieces of railroad equipment, and we use all of our revenue stream to upkeep and restore our property, our assets. We're all volunteer. There's no paid staff with the organization. We're in the process of identifying significant upgrades that we will be doing to the Stockbridge station, state of good repair. The first of which being the platform reconstruction, which we hope to start this summer. The concrete around the apron and platform has deteriorated pretty significantly, poses tripping hazards and whatnot. So we're putting about $60,000 into that alone, and we were just awarded $15,000 from the CPA committee to go toward that project. So the reason why we applied for the tax exempt status is it's, for our organization, the real estate taxes are pretty significant, and we would like to put that money back into the station if you would be willing to grant us that status. And that, in a nutshell, is where we're at. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So how is the station used for the benefit of the nonprofit? So just because a nonprofit owns an asset doesn't justify that it be not taxable.
Sure. Well, we, as I said, once we do run train rides again, that'll be our southern terminus where our passengers will get off and use the station, see the grounds and whatnot. In the meantime, until that happens, we are looking for revenue streams to be able to fund the upkeep and state of repair for the station. We are working with an event manager. We maintain control of the station, but we're working with an event manager to hold events and look at some creative ways to raise money at the space to be able to be self-sustaining with that property. So we'll be doing some small concerts, fundraisers there and whatnot. And it's Justin Karafotis of Handcrafted, and he's in the process of looking at some sort of events and whatnot that we'll have there to raise money for the museum.
Okay. I mean, so just because, so what I'm hearing is sort of you're trying to operate a little bit of a business down there to help generate revenue, to help support the mission of the nonprofit, but that there actually sounds more like it does not qualify for nonprofit status.
No, if I could jump in, right now the station is a net negative to the organization. It's a strategic asset to have, and the opportunity to have it and preserve it is very important. But right now, the rest of the organization is subsidizing that. And so what we're trying to do is to get to zero with that facility and, get to zero, but then also enhancing and making sure that it's going to be there for another 100 years. So that's, and the tax burden, you know, I understand whatever. It's not like we're coming here to say, you know, we're trying to get a tax break from Stockbridge to invest money in some other community. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to just, you know, preserve what's here, and not have it become a drain on the organization.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the utilities alone for the station being empty are exorbitant. The heat at 50 degrees all winter runs about $1,000 a month. So we're looking to, as Tim said, not make money off it, but be able to sustain itself. When we purchased the property, because of that drain, we actively looked with a real estate agent to put other tenants in there. And there was some significant interest, which certainly wouldn't then, you know, fall under any type of tax exempt status. We realized that. But the types of tenants that we were getting interest in wouldn't maintain the historic character and our ability to then use it for future station train rides. So we had to, you know, walk a fine line, you know, being able to raise money for the museum to support the station and maintain, you know, our future use and the historic nature of the station.
When you say museum, what exactly is that? And is it something that's open to the public every day?
The museum itself is based in Lenox. We own the Lenox Railroad Station, which is actually in the Lenoxdale part of town. We've been there for close to 40 years now. We have a museum set up there with exhibits. That's where all of our equipment is for the train rides. As I said, we're all volunteer, so it's not open daily. The Lenox station is open Saturdays. We currently don't have any exhibits at the Stockbridge station. However, we're happy to work with other groups, such as we host the Stockbridge Tuesday Ladies group there for their meetings. We've done some other events there. The Fire Intake Fire Truck Association is asking to be able to hold their annual event there. We've done that for many years at the Stockbridge station. So we're looking to, as I said, maintain complete control of the museum, not rent it out. But we do need to have a revenue source there to maintain the utilities and do these significant upgrades that we would like to do to it.
How can you not rent it out and have a revenue source? There's a little disconnect there.
No, if we don't-
You broke up.
How can you rent it out but not have a revenue source?
We're not going to rent it out. We've chosen not to rent it out. To rent it out, we had folks like doctors' offices, lawyers' offices, et cetera, express an interest in putting their offices there, but we would lose full control over the station. That's not the intent. That's not High Meadows' intent when they restored the station to a railroad station. We want to maintain control of it, but be able to have an income source there to maintain its upkeep.
I think
Go
the
ahead.
difference is we're allowing events to be held there versus renting it out as a commercial, like a doctor's office.
So
Yeah,
are the events there to support the nonprofit itself?
Yes.
So in other words, it's going to be events for the train station.
Yes.
There's not going to be.
No, it's gonna be events, and the revenue generated from those events are gonna support the train station.
Right.
Okay, well, that's the thing is, you know, yeah, I am not sure if that is sufficient to justify this type of, again, there's a lot of nonprofits that own lots of real estate in the area across the state. It generates lots of revenue for the nonprofits, which the nonprofit use to support their mission. But that is still a taxable use. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I mean, I think if we were in a situation where our business relationship at that station was generating significant revenue, we wouldn't be having this conversation, we're having this conversation because the rest of the organization is pouring money into Stockbridge for the benefit of that station, and we're getting, little out of it. And I mean, certainly, from a business perspective, if we were not a not-for-profit, we would turn it into, a doctor's office or something like that. And we'd lose, everyone would lose the ability to keep it as a train station.
For example, we're going to have a benefit concert there. The only thing that we currently have scheduled is a benefit concert in August. We did it last August as well. Local band and that also has their own memorial fundraising effort that we're going to split the proceeds from this concert, half to that other organization and half to maintain the station. So I guess we would like to know what your opinion of acceptable revenue sources for that station would be. We need to do something there to bring revenue into that station.
So my question perhaps to you, Doug, is if a not-for-profit like a hospital owns a building and the purpose of that building is to rent it out for doctors' offices. So if the purpose of the building is to generate revenue for the larger institution, and if it's rented out on a yearly basis, that's one thing. But is there a difference when it's rented out specifically for events to maintain that particular historic structure, which is part of the mission of the Scenic Railroad, even though it's not being actively used right now, but there are plans to use it, and it does maintain the mission of. So the purpose for keeping it is not as a long-term revenue source, but is as an integral part of the Scenic Railroad. So I'm just trying to parse out if there's a difference.
So let's say, I think it would have to be substantial use for the benefit for the nonprofit. So again, if there was 8 functions there, 5 of the functions were directly related to the Scenic Railroad to help, fundraise and to help having museums and help having events for the Scenic Railroad. If it's substantial in majority, that's a little bit more towards a nonprofit. But if they're just happening to having weddings there and fundraisers for other organizations and fire truck shows, it's not necessarily advancing the mission of the nonprofit. I mean, I think if the station was actually vacant and not used, is probably a little bit more palatable from a nonprofit status, but when it's actively used for other purposes,
Not related to the
not related to the
actual
mission, it does create a problem. And so we do have the same issue with other nonprofits in town, where we had a multifamily house that was used by a nonprofit. They let their employees live in it, and again, it was nonprofit. But all of a sudden, they started renting it at market rate conditions for the general public, even though the funds are used to maintain that property and go back to the nonprofit. It's really not fully, so that had to go back.
And one was a doctor's office, to use that as an example.
So my question again
I
is,
said it was rented to a doctor's, part of the building was rented to a doctor's office. And I immediately sent a letter to the organization, and they came back and said, okay, you're right. Well, you can tax us for it.
okay.
So it's, they knew that, but it.
So again,
a little.
there's a difference. I mean, if the Scenic Railroad signed
So if the Scenic Railroad had a museum there, it was open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they happened to have 5 events during the year to rent, that's probably fine. So when you have an auxiliary use being that's like, say, Chesterwood or something that has a museum going on and they supplement their income by having weddings.
Namkeg too.
Non-peg. So, so the thing is, there has to be a primary use for the nonprofit to justify the exemption. And then if there's auxiliary things used to support the nonprofit, that's a little bit more palatable. But when right out of the gate, it comes like as a business trying to support the nonprofit, it's a little bit harder to pass muster.
Well, again, is there a difference between, this is not an investment that's a 5-year lease with a restaurant. The Scenic Railroad maintains, they are the primary tenant, and they're trying to restore it and keep it for when it's more active. And to help maintain that building, which is part of their mission,
So we make this decision each and every year.
yeah,
So the use of the station is going to change periodically based on what you need it for. And if the track is available, your usage would be a lot different. So again, all I'm saying is that, right now, I haven't heard.
I guess from
let me just
my
follow up if I could. So right now, the building, as we've heard, is a liability for the Scenic Railroad. It's costing their money to maintain it, to keep heat in the winter, just to keep it. They own this not as an investment, but as part of their Scenic Railroad program. To maintain that building as part of the program, they do have events manager to help raise money to maintain that building. It seems to me it's a difference between that and a church that owns a house that they're renting out at commercial rates.
Well, I think the big question is July 1st is the exemption date. Every July 1st, when it rolls around, what is that building being used for? And is it being used for on a steady basis? Or is it just on occasion, we're going to do something, here, an event, a train ride? I have a feeling that would be an issue with locals in town, especially, with the amount of exemptions that we have, as to really what is the purpose of
Seems
this
to me that
organization.
the main purpose of this building is not as a revenue stream, but the main purpose is to maintain a facility for the Scenic Railroad that's costing the Scenic Railroad money. To help offset that expense, they trying to stage some fundraising events. And I'm just wondering whether there's a significant difference here.
So again, just because a real estate property has heavy carrying costs, which justifies or necessitates the use of renting it out to create revenue stream, I can see from a ownership how that can transpire. But again, that goes against what the nonprofit is. So again, if the building is used in a substantial way to support the nonprofit and its mission, I think it's clear that we would grant an exemption. But if the usage is not consistent with the nonprofit and it's only being rented to financially support it, that's not fair to the taxpayer because it's not being used in a nonprofit way. So again, if the building was used substantially or majority for nonprofit purposes and they had occasional fundraisers to help support and pay for the building, that's different than if you're just, we got to raise money somehow to keep this thing going. And therefore it's going to be used commercially any way you can to try to justify. We just need to make sure that it's used as a nonprofit purpose. Gary,
That's the
what's
whole point.
your thought?
Well, I just said to Mike, this might be a great question to thread the needle with the town council to get their opinion on it, but I know that previously, when High Meadow had it, it was almost the same scenario,
Very much so.
and we turned them down
Yeah.
I
because,
think if I may, High Meadow was using it for the Red Lion Inn events. That was a completely different character of events. That was a for-profit using a nonprofit space for profit. We
But-
are not that way. We are, the building is on the National Historic Register. We're trying to maintain it. Be happy, I completely, understand your position, but we'd very much like to know what sort of events that you think that we can do there to raise money to maintain the building.
So
We
just-
didn't want to rent it out to a lawyer, a doctor, or anything like that, because that would completely change the character of the building and its use.
Well, that would eliminate, even if you did do that, there's no way you could be under a tax exempt status
We
ever.
I
understand
think
that.
what Doug is trying to say is that we don't have a clear example. For instance, if you folks were going to be open Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or even Saturday and Sunday every month for railroad activities, then we have a clear line of sight that that's your purpose for that building. Whereas now, you're going to have random events that tertiarily are part of your organization because the funds are going to go to your organization, but it doesn't give us a clear example or argument to say, this is the Berkshire Scenic Railway using the building on a regular basis for your primary mission.
And going back to
I'm sorry.
and going back to your example about the High Meadow Foundation, the High Meadow Foundation was a nonprofit just like yourself, renting it to the Red Lion Inn, which is a commercial entity.
Right.
So if your person who's going to be taking over the responsibility for the building and renting it, are they a nonprofit?
Nobody is taking over responsibility for the building. We're working with an event manager, but we have not leased the building out.
So is the event manager only going to be renting to nonprofits?
He's going to be holding events there. I can't say who, what.
Yeah, which is very similar to what the High Meadow was doing with the Red Lion Inn, and that's why we couldn't grant it to the Red
Well,
Lion Inn.
I have to say, I see a difference between High Meadow and the Scenic Railroad. Namely, the mission of High Meadow was not to have a historic station as part of their integral mission. It was just an asset that they had, but this is different. This is a building the use of a building, the primary use of a building right now is to hold it and to restore it as a facility for the Scenic Railroad. That's the primary use.
Yeah, well, that's,
Renting it out for occasions is just to enable them to keep it and not to be a drain, to maintain their program. So I do see a significant difference between this and the High Meadow.
Well, I would make the suggestion to have Mike contact town council and have them listen to, what these folks said, what our thinking is, both Tom's and Doug's and mine, and let them give us an answer. Because otherwise, we're just going to keep going around and around. I can see a point on both sides. So I guess what I would say is, let us contact our town council, and then we will get back to you folks as soon as we have an answer.
And I appreciate that. I think that's very fair. And to your point, just so we have a better understanding, we want to work with you. We want to work with the community. So I think I'm hearing, we don't currently have exhibits up in the station, but we have a very nice Gilded Age exhibit that talks about all of the Gilded Age cottages that could certainly be a fit in that station. And if that was a requirement, that we established that and actually opened it as a museum for a couple days a week, and then we're not going to charge anybody for that. People aren't going to pay to come in to the Stockbridge station to see a Gilded Age exhibit. So that's not still going to be.
You could ask for donations, though. I mean, I don't think we'd have an issue with that.
No, we certainly could have a donation box out there. Completely understand. But if you're saying that having an exhibit in the station and then having these ancillary events as fundraisers, we could work with that.
And that gives us more basis to allow this. Because I mean, again, you have to primarily be used in a nonprofit way to justify it, and then hopefully you can do events to help.
I just think that it allows us a clear line of logic as to why we would grant you the exemption versus not.
Yeah.
Kevin, would it be okay for us to mention to town council that you've made this offer to put an exhibit there and have it open to the public on certain days?
Sure. If that's what we need to do, we will certainly do that. I mean, like I said, we do have some very nice exhibit panels for the Gilded Age. We could put them up there that would be open for the public to look at with whatever other events that our event coordinator, has in mind. And we would certainly like to have a more in-depth discussion with you as to what sort of events we could still do there without running afoul. I mean,
I don't think the events are the issue. I think you folks can do, whatever is you feel is appropriate. We don't have, our part is not the events, it's the use.
Sure.
The actual use of the building. What you do for fundraising, as long as it doesn't run afoul of zoning, would be fine with us. That isn't our piece. Our piece is just to make sure we can make a substantive argument for giving you the exemption.
Understood. And just to be fully open and transparent and working with you on this, Justin Carafotis, as I said, he owns a company called Handcrafted, and he does events management. And we were just successful in applying for an event license. I don't want to mischaracterize the exact license that we got because I wasn't fully involved with that. But he has some plans to do, and I don't know much about this, pop-up cafes, like a pop-up coffee shop, that certainly if we're having a pop-up coffee event there, then we would have these Gilded Age exhibits in there for the public to view and learn about the history of the area and the station. If that meets your criteria, certainly we could do that. Right now it's just an empty space. It's a beautifully restored. I don't know if you've been there, but you're welcome to come down and beautifully.
No, our concern is that you're using that building on a regular basis for your mission as a non-for-profit Berkshire Scenic Railway organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need. That's what we need to see.
That is our intention. That's why we didn't rent it out to a doctor or a lawyer. We didn't want to lose that control of our mission there.
Sure. So if you want to set up an exhibit, I think I believe that would clear the way, but we will double check with town council.
Fair enough. We appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We greatly appreciate you coming to us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know.
So Mike, if you could just reach out to
I'll send an email.
and ask them to
review this,
and also
too.
to give us if they could give us a really clearer definition that we can go by.
Yeah, and also you can
Refer to this.
And you can refer to the meeting that they can see what we're saying.
Good suggestion, Gary. I agree.
Okay. Now, Mike, do we have to go into executive session
You
today?
do for the review of motor vehicle abatements.
Okay.
So number 9, it looks like there's nobody else here.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Is there anybody on Zoom?
No, nobody is there.
Okay. So at this point, our open meeting, we will end. And I would entertain motion to go into executive session per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to discuss and review motor vehicle abatements. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we will not return to the public. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you at our next meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.